was to start at 1 o'clock. The meeting was supposed to start at 1 o'clock. It's 1:15 due to a previous going overtime. So I will call this meeting to order, and we will have a roll call. Katie, I guess, will do that.
This is Chris, Chairman. I'll do that.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Okay. So, Chair Philman?
Present.
Anyone here on behalf of Senator Hughes? Ms. Marchowski or Mr. Duncan? Which one are we going to be having?
Charles Duncan.
Charles, thank you. Mr. Jordan?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Thal?
Here.
Thank you. And on behalf of Treasurer Torcella, Mr. Ebright?
Yeah, Lloyd Ebright's here. Hello.
Thank you. All right. We have a quorum, and I also want to note for the record that this meeting is being recorded.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Now for the next piece of business, the approval of the minutes of September 30th of 2020, Board Governance and Personnel Committee meeting. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved, Duncan.
Second, Thal.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing no opposed, those minutes are approved. There is no old business. There is no special presentation. Under new business, this is our usual, for those new to the committee, usual end of the year business that we take care of dealing with a lot of personnel issues. So with that, either Katie or Chris, you're in charge.
Thank you, Chairman Philman. Good afternoon. I'm Katie Matthews, HR Director for SERS. The first two agenda items I'll be speaking about relate to the compensation policy for investment professionals. We'll start with the pay band adjustments. You should find the related memo under 6A, Executive Content, in Board Docs. The comp policy provides for reviewing market data to determine whether adjustments should be made to salary pay bands. Reviewing the pay bands annually and adjusting the minimum and maximum values of the pay bands as needed helps us keep our pay structure relevant in between the periods of time when more extensive compensation studies are completed. As you heard at the September meeting, SERS will be undertaking a comprehensive classification and compensation study to include investment professionals. We are looking to begin procurement for a consultant early in the new year. In the meantime, we are currently receiving annual market data from CBIZ. If you look at the end of the memo, you will see the compensation charts. The salary adjustment chart, that's the one in green, shows the pay increases to professionals in the industry. For the pay band discussion, we want to focus on the second chart, which is the tan goldish color. That's the salary structure adjustments. This is the data which relates to our pay range bands. The recommendation is to increase the minimum and maximum values of each pay band by approximately 1.7%. Last year, we adjusted the bands by 2%. The 1.7% number matches the CBIZ salary structure adjustment projected for 2021 for exempt positions in the financial industry. SERS's peer group for our compensation plan is comprised of plans across the country, so that's why we look to the national data. I'd like to emphasize that adjusting the pay band values does not result in automatic pay increases for existing staff. The exception would be any staff whose salaries fall below a new established band minimum. I believe for this current period that would be 2 individuals. These employees would receive raises to bring their salaries up to the newly established pay band minimum. If there are any questions, I can entertain those now. You can use the hand feature. I believe if you click on it, we'll see that you have a question, and then once we address your question, you can click on it again, and that should unraise your hand.
Katie, just so we understand, the basic premise is what we've been doing for years. It's just the difference between the 2% last year and the 1.7% this year. Is that accurate?
Correct. We followed this procedure for a few years now.
Okay. The floor is open for any questions, comments? Okay, seeing none,
Oh,
we'll
someone.
now put the motion in order. Oh, go
Mr.
ahead.
Philman, I think Mr. Jordan has a question.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I was just wondering, the differential between the eastern region and the national, the 1.7 versus the 1.9, is that because salaries in New York and Boston skew the eastern numbers up a little bit?
I don't have access to the raw data. I only have the summary data that CBiz provides. But based on how they're breaking apart the country and the locations, yes, it is influenced by location.
Okay, I was just wondering. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments?
Senator DeSanto?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure I'm following here, Chairman Philman. I was looking at the motion and it says it's a 5% increase. Is that something different? We're saying 1.7 here?
That's the next piece of business. We're at 1.7. It's the one before that.
And this is for whom?
Go ahead, Katie.
This is for our overall compensation policy for investment professionals. So each job title is slotted into a pay band, and those pay bands have minimum and maximum values. So when we hire or promote people, they're placed within the band. So this discussion is to adjust purely the minimum and maximum values of each of those different bands.
I got you now. I apologize.
Not a problem. I'm not
Anyone
seeing
else?
any additional hands.
Okay. Seeing none, a motion is in order to recommend to the State Employees Retirement Board to, 1, approve a 1.7% upward adjustment. Actual values may vary slightly in accordance with standard calculations for Commonwealth pay to the salary bands for investment professionals to be effective January 1st, 2021, and 2, that the values in the compensation policy for investment professional staff, State Employees Retirement System, be updated accordingly. Can I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I hear a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
I hear a second. Any questions on the motion? Questions on the motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Chair Philman,
Aye.
Mr. Duncan on behalf of Senator Hughes,
Aye.
Mr. Jordan,
Aye.
Mr. Thal,
Aye.
Mr. Ebright on behalf of Treasurer Trisella.
Aye.
Motion's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Next one, Katie.
So next up, we have the issue of the aggregate pay increase budget for our investment professionals. The related memo should be under 6A, executive content in board docs. Staff covered under the comp policy, which are our investment professionals in the investment office and a few investment professionals in the Office of Financial Management, receive performance-based pay increases, which are effective the first full pay period of March. Unlike other positions, our investment professionals do not receive cost of living general pay increases or longevity step increases. The board is responsible for approving a pay increase budget for the investment professionals. This committee makes a recommendation to the board. SERS is recommending the 2021 aggregate pay increase budget be set at 5% of salary. Last year, we set this at 6% of salary. The 5% of salary excludes the salaries for the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Investment Officer. This recommendation was discussed with the Executive Director, Chief Financial Officer, and Chief Investment Officer. The CFO has confirmed that the SERS budget can support the 5% of salary recommendation. Keep in mind, it is preferable to set a pay increase budget which allows leadership the flexibility to recognize different performance levels. There may be staff whose compensation remains unchanged during this process, while someone else may receive a 7% performance-based increase. And just because a maximum aggregate budget is authorized, it does not mean that the full increase budget needs to be utilized. Supervisors will be evaluating employee performance against established goals. The specific pay increases for staff are then discussed at a future meeting. So we use today to establish a budget, and then the CFO and the CIO work within that budget to make the individual staff performance-based pay increase recommendations. If there are questions, I can take those now.
Let me just say this, Katie. Obviously, last year it was 6%, it's 5% now. This recommendation comes from the Chief Financial Officer as well as the CIO and the Executive Director. For over the years, it's been a high priority, at least with me and I think with all of the board members, to maintain competitive as best as we can for the investment staff. Again, this is the same process we've used over the years. We're only plugging in the 5% versus 6% for last year. But again, the premise is to get as much as we can as stability in the investment office with the staff, and this goes along that way. So with that, I'll open the floor up. Go ahead, Katie, you can take over.
Senator DeSanto?
Yes, thank you. I understand, agree with Chairman Philman's position, but I'm just wondering, with the COVID epidemic and everything else, the CBIZ reports only calling for 3%, and over here at the Senate, we've limited it to 1.47%. And as you all know, all the state programs were flat funded in this current budget that we just passed. And I'm just wondering why we're going to the 5%. In these extraordinary times is my first question. And my second, and it's related, has our staffing increased or decreased over the last year?
We may have increased slightly. We've stayed fairly stable. Mm-hmm. And to your other questions, so the CBIZ data is giving you an average. It's just over 3%. And when we look at that information and we gave it consideration, you think of that as kind of a baseline for a satisfactory and performing individual, all other things considered equal. Those individuals are probably going to get increases around 3%. And so with our compensation policy, we're trying to build in some room so that your commendable, your outstanding performers are able to get something that recognizes their hard work and the efforts that they've put in to retain them as solid individuals for our agency. The other thing that we looked at, and you'll see in your materials, is how do the pay for our unionized covered staff, and then most of our management positions track with the unionized personnel, and what are those individuals receiving as far as pay increases go? Because again, if our investment professionals are not entitled to those other type of increases, this is the one and only opportunity that the majority of them will have for a pay increase. And so when we looked at those, when we looked at the period of March 2020 through February of 2021, that was about 2.25% increase for the unionized covered staff and other management personnel. When we look forward to the period of March 2021 through February of 2022, the increase is about 4.75% for individuals in those positions. Again, those are increases that our investment professionals will not receive. And so we build in some flexibility or we attempt to in the budget so that we can recognize the differences in performance across the investment professional staff.
I appreciate that. It's just, I know it's very hard when there's so many people across the Commonwealth really struggling that, in fact, we're, offering raises to people when people are taking real hits. And in addition to that, inflation's only 2%. Why are we going at 3%, even if we're trying to toe the line?
Understood. Thank you. Mr. Thal? I think you might
Greg,
be
you're on mute.
Sorry, hit the wrong button. Thank you. I recognize some of the senators' concerns, but I think this is a important tool to make enough revenue available to be used by management to reward outstanding work, especially in the investment office. If we are losing talented people and not able to keep them, that it falls back on the senator to find additional contributions in the appropriations, which I don't think anyone wants. So I agree that it's a high number, and maybe when we get to that, we don't use the entire pot and are able to keep some in reserve and return it.
Well, I would just respond, it's not up to me to find additional contributions. If the plan and the system would perform better, we'd have a much better opportunity to offer those raises. I'm a board member. It's not my job to provide returns to this organization.
No, and I'm sorry if I wasn't being clear, and I didn't mean to insinuate that. It was just part of our budget. Where?
Mr. Duncan?
Yes, and just for my own clarity, the 5% is the ceiling, and these for the investment professionals is all merit based. So I believe you said that an individual within the investment office could foreseeably or possibly get 1%, but if they perform well, they can get a maximum of 5%. So it's not a 5% across the board, similar to the unionized employees, correct?
Yes and no, or no and yes. So the way it works is if you authorize a 5% of salary, I take all the current investment professional staff that we have, excluding the CFO and the CIO, and I multiply that by 5%, and that gives us the budget. So for the finance staff, it's, I want to say, around $17,000. For the investment office, it's about $108,000 that they would have as their maximum budget. So it's not, we're not saying that the maximum pay increase any one individual could get would be 5%. It's how I just calculate a pool of money. So we can have an investment professional who gets 1%. We can have someone who gets 3%. We could have someone who gets 6%. Does that clarify?
Okay, thanks for that clarity. Yes.
Okay.
This is just a pool of money. So we're not talking
Exactly.
about the actual increases for investment staff. This is the available money to possibly provide an increase to an investment professional or a professional in F&A.
Right. It's just the dollar figure that the CFO and the CIO then have to spread across their entire teams of investment professionals.
Which theoretically could end up at what we would. Yes. So basically, it will not exceed what has become the norm nationally of around what inflation is or what the normal adjusted COLAs are, theoretically. Thank you.
Okay. And once again, the concept has been in place for many years. We're just plugging in the number for that pool, as Katie has indicated. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. A motion is in order to recommend to the State Employees Retirement Board to approve the annual aggregate pay increase budget for 2021 to be set at 5% of salary for investment professional staff for positions below that of the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Investment Officer, whose pay increases will be determined in accordance with the compensation policy for investment professional staff, State Employees Retirement System. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I hear a
Duncan.
motion from Duncan. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second from Greg Jordan. Roll call, please.
Chair Fellman,
Aye.
Mr. Duncan on behalf of Senator Hughes,
Aye.
Mr. Jordan,
Aye.
Mr. Thal,
Aye.
and Mr. Ebright on behalf of Treasurer Torsella.
Aye.
Motion's unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much. Katie, Executive Director, Annual Review Process.
Yes, so as Chairman Philman indicated, the next agenda item is the Executive Director Annual Review Process. Related information should be under 6B in Executive Content in Board Docs. This committee is responsible to develop quantitative performance goals for the Executive Director position and to seek input from the Board on the Executive Director's performance for inclusion in the annual performance evaluation. There is a feedback input form posted to Board Docs that you may make use of, but you're not required to use the form. Feedback should be provided to the Board Governance and Personnel Committee Chair by December 31st. I will send out an email this week which includes the feedback form and a copy of the existing 2020 goals. Again, this is another practice that we followed for a few years. At this point in time, the Executive Director position is on a calendar year review cycle, so the rating period is January through the end of December. Questions, comments?
Okay. Thank you very much. Again, this is something we do each year, and I encourage feedback by all board members as far as that goes. With that, I guess we're set up for an executive session. If someone could tee that up, please.
Yes, this is Joe Marcucci, Chief Counsel. The topic for the executive session is a personnel matter involving specific individuals, one or more of them. Personnel matters discussing specific individuals is an authorized and appropriate topic for executive session.
Okay, Terry, if you can let us know when we're in executive session, please.
Will do.
Are we now in public, Terry?
Hold on 1 second.
Okay, Chris.
Stream working? Stream's working. Nothing's changed on the screen yet. Out here. Can you check our stream? Are we running? What slide do you have up there? Executive session, but we should be showing that.
We're just following you, Hines, so we just don't have to start business. We're out of public session technically, right? It's just that it's not live streaming yet?
Yeah, we're recording. Randy's talking to the radio.
Rose,
We can go.
Rose, just make sure you're recording.
We can go. We're recording video too.
Let the chairman know.
You can start, Chairman.
Okay. Joe or Chris, do you have to intro us into the public session?
No, you can go ahead and just say we're back in public.
No, we don't. We don't have to say anything. You can just open us up.
Okay. We are now in public session. This is still the Board Governance and Personnel Committee. And after some executive session discussions, I have a motion for the floor in public session. A motion is in order to approve a pay adjustment for Deputy Chief Investment Officer James G. Nolan to an hourly rate of $135.09 an hour.